follows mostly the joint monitoring program indicators. So when we talk about the citywide inclusive sanitation, then mostly the value chain indicators comes up. We realize that the JMP indicators alone might not be sufficient, and we need to integrate some value chain indicators as well. I on the later part of the slides will try to show how we are trying to do that. So you can see this is the example of one municipality that we have done the work. This is from Korzana municipality, that is nearby Lahan. So here you can get how much of population, how much of households have the toilet available, and how much of households don't have the toilet available. So this kind of data we can get from the system. And from safely managed, we have few indicators to qualify it as safely managed, basic, limited, unlimited, and no service. So the service ladder follows the JMPs, Joint Monitoring Programs definitions. So here you can see why CVs might be important. Here you can see, although the safely managed data is very less, you can see most of the areas safely managed data is high, not because of they have the fecal sludge treatment units, but because the pits have not been emptied yet. So it's like we can identify the problems inside the municipality, because we finished the open defecation free. We did open defecation free like 4 or 5 years ago. Was it 5 years ago? In 2019, that is 5 years ago. So the problem that now coming is the pits are now filling up, and we need to identify, although the JMP qualifies it as the safely managed till now, but there is a huge risk that this might not be safely managed in coming future. So to identify where the treatment units and where the transportation and treatment units might be required, this data might be one of the areas to see, where we can see how many pits are not emptied yet. We also have the age related data also, like when the pit was constructed, how frequent the pits are emptied. So this kind of data also, which can be one of the analysis factor while designing the fecal sludge management. So these are the areas that we have finished the data collection. So there are like 753 rural municipalities and municipalities. Among those, we have finished the data collection of 258. So, and prioritization has been finished in 173, and the WASH plan has been completed in 158. So this is even to initiate the baseline data, where the local governments need to have the capacity. Right now, what is happening is like lot of agencies are supporting in this data initiative, but the future challenge might be how do the local governments take up this data updates and everything. So unless the local government have the capacity on this regard, the data might be only one time. So we don't want that to happen. So now our focus is more on the how we can build the capacity of local government on updating and using up those data sets. The major challenge that we faced from system strengthening point of view is like the organogram of most of the local governments don't have the dedicated WASH units. So we initiated with the WASH focal persons right now. So WASH focal person has been now at least the focal person's name are inside our system. So that is inside the government's database, that who is the focal person for that local government. But we are equally aware that only focal person might not be enough for doing everything in WASH. So that needs to have the WASH unit. And that can only happen with the discussion with the other ministries, such as like Ministry of Federal Affairs and General Administration, Ministry of Finance, because finance will also involve. So these data sets have allowed us to do the advocacy for those kind of initiatives.
How often, or who's responsible for updating the data, and how often
we have still not reached up to that point. So right now the focus is on baseline data, but parallelly we are trying to set up the organogram and focal persons which would be at least be able to update the data on an annual basis, so that this could be taken apart. But we noticed that in the developing countries, the administrative data comes as the prerequisite. For example, even from the building permits, the data can come. But when we move from developing countries to underdeveloped countries, so the data slowly changes towards the survey. From administrative data, it comes to survey.
Yeah.
So everything happens between survey to administrative data, and I will say we are in the transition of making survey to administrative data. So we are in that stage right now.
Yeah.
So our focus should be how we can make these data sets administrative data, so that local government will be willing to update these all data sets.
Yeah.
So that's how we should
Because
proceed.
it's the baseline with all the surveys takes a lot of time.
So right now we are still in survey stage, but we need to formulate a strategy to make those survey into administrative data sets. How we can do that in local government. And the interesting thing is we're talking about 753 local governments, but this thing might not be same for all local governments. Some local governments, to change from survey to administrative data might require longer time, but some local governments, to change from survey to administrative data will be easier because of their resource and their revenue also. So we need to benchmark the local governments also in order to know how we can do it. You can ask questions anytime you want. So there is no means if I finish my presentation, you might forget the question. So you can ask anytime. So this is the example. For example, we collected the status, and based on that one, we created the estimation module. So we wanted estimation module to be such that it should capture all the life cycle cost assessments. So not only the capital investment requirement, you can see in the blue diagram, this is the capital investment requirement. We are thinking about how much requirement will be on capital maintenance, operational expenditures, direct support. So, and this one is the total.
And are there default values, or can the municipalities put their own costs?
So there are two ideas have been put forward inside this system. One, they can change the rate according to municipality. For example, the dislodging rate might not be same for all municipality or rural municipality. They can set that. But how many human resource will be required to do so, we have put that as the same data category. For example, how many soaps will be required in one public toilet is the constant category, whereas the soaps rate is the changing category, which local governments can put.
Okay.
So we are expecting this one to be at least 70 to 80% accurate in terms of planning. So we'll be thinking it as successful if we achieve during the pre-feasibility, if it is in between 70 to 80%, this might be a successful plan. So there are lot of approximations that we have done, but at least we have the data on how much investment will be required. So what this will do is local government will be able to know how much tariff we should set so that we could run sustainably. How much should be the dislodging rate so that they could run sustainably. So that will give at least kind of idea on how to bring the investment inside.
And does it factor in asset management planning or?
I will come that in the later part.
Okay.
So that is still to be incorporated, but we have some idea on how to do it.
Okay.
So these are the database that this is in Nepali, but this is about the government's database, that whether they are properly following the planning related data or not. For example, if they prioritize the project, whether their annual plan and these prioritizations are in line or not. Whether the provincial government's budget and the prioritized local government are in line or not. So these kind of data also we are trying to formulate, and we have come up with few ideas on how to how to improve how to leverage the local governments. For example, like during the expenditure tracking, let's say, for example, local governments expected 50% of the investment from the transfer, that is from the federal and provincial government, but that year they got only 30%. So we are thinking, right now it is not in the system, but we are thinking, let's pop up few more questions for the local government to know, for example, like whether the mayor has visited the provincial planning commission, taking their priority agenda or not, whether that meeting is minuted or not. So that will give the local political leaders idea that what should be the step to be followed after the investment calculation and expenditure planning is done. So typical areas we are trying to see. For example, like if the OPEX is not achieved, then we'll come up with the idea whether you have the tariff regulation or not. Then we'll identify the bottlenecks also through the management information system. So we are thinking of adding few condition-based questions based on the expenditures.
Okay.
So you're getting my point, right? Or you're getting my point?
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
So generally the CBIS principle is on this one. So we try to cover the responsibility and accountability through these question answers. So similarly, here we have the legal frameworks related document. Which of the documents you are prepared? So here we'll know whether the local governments are strong in terms of setting up the regulatory frameworks and policy guidelines and standards and monitoring guidelines. So what this will do is like we will be able to benchmark the local governments based on the legal frameworks and documents, policy interventions, and then we can set up like if we make the national templates, then we can give them communicate the national templates that will allow them to use those templates, that will allow them to customize those templates. So smaller investment in federal government might bring the bigger impact on the local governments. And then here that these questions are about the institutional arrangements, whether they have the focal person or not, what is the phone number, whether the focal person's TOR is clear or not, whether he is capacitated in terms of TOR or not, whether the self-assessment of training has been done or not. So these kind of questions are there. Then we will come to financing options, where we will talk more about the tariff, tax, transfer, self-supply, and these options. Inside there is a module where they can set up those data sets and come up with an idea.
Is it easy to get financing?
Sorry? Yeah.
Is it easy to get financing?
So for example, this is like first time local governments are practicing these kind of things. So at least they know the terms like okay, tax means this means my money need to be put here. So tariff means I need to generate the tariff guideline, and the tariff should be generated from the service provider, which should be able to cover at least operational cost or maintenance cost, or maybe if we want to do the repayable financing, maybe the capital cost also. And they can, if the financing is like not meeting the investment requirement, then they can go for the innovative options, for example like public-private partnerships or repayable financing models. So we can discuss those things at least with the local governments depending upon the investment requirement. So we have initiated sensitizing the local political leaders on how to leverage the overall financing. So based on that one, we are thinking of doing pilot on developing elaborative financing strategy in some local governments with the help of municipal associations also. So if one or two becomes champion on that one, that is also like replicable to other local governments. So that is the idea. Service provision regulation in sanitation is still evolving. That we discussed during today's meeting as well. Generally, in water supply service providers, we have done few works, which I will show now, and then with the same module, with the same idea, we can do work on. So these are like few benchmarking reports that we made. It was initiated from January 2014. So it was initiated from 14. So we already prepared like 5 benchmarking reports for the water service providers. But it is very interesting to know that in these 10 years, no one thought of creating the benchmarking report for the sanitation service provisions. At least we are thinking we need to know some kind of benchmarking, like whether the sanitation provider is formal or informal, and how they are doing the occupational health. So this kind of like very few, but the benchmarking initiatives need to be initiated in this sanitation service provision. So this will allow us to know where we are in terms of service provision. So these are the size of utilities in the water users, in the water service provision. We don't have this kind of data in sanitation, as I mentioned before. So if these kind of data can come in sanitation, then we can know how to move forward in the sanitation service delivery. I'll give you example on that one as well. So this is like availability in hours per day during dry months for water user communities. So if we have these kind of data sets, we know although these are designed for the 24-hour service, so they are not getting the water for like 24 hours during the dry season. So this is example for the water supply. So this kind of analysis need to be done for the sanitation service provision also. So the latest benchmarking that we did focus mostly on the activity development for the business plan of service providers. So if this becomes successful, this can be the template for the sanitation service providers also. We talked about the asset management, right? So here there are like scores on asset management. So this is not like this is like what they are following, what kind of processes they are following in asset management. So the scores are like whether the asset inventory is present there or not, whether we have the geo-reference data or not, whether they have the asset A's or not, whether they have the replacement strategy or not. So these are like indicators inside the asset management, and based on that one, the operators are getting the scores. So we can follow the similar kind of benchmarking templates for the sanitation service providers also. So this will give us the idea on what kind of activity need to be done on which service providers, and based on that one, the capacity development program can be developed for the service providers. So once the regulation comes, we are telling the regulation should not be an enforceable one, but it should follow up with the capacity building packages, so that, and some kind of result-based financing that you need to reach after you get this capacity building. You need to reach like this goal on 5 years or so, and the business plan need to be developed on that one.
And because I find a lot of times there's different expectations on what's involved in a business plan. Like T, what
we are trying to standardize it.
Okay.
We're trying to standardize it. I will try to show you some water supply examples, which we might be doing same on the sanitation also. We had like more than we had like 23 indicators, and based on that one, we try to find out where they are in terms of these small dots that you see, where they are in terms of level and quality of water supply service and operation and management efficiency. So if you see this, you will see this as this vertical axis as the outputs of those service providers. For example, like whether the service is reliable or not, whether they are getting 24-hour service or not, quantity, and these kind of things are in the level and quality of water supply services. But here we will talk more about the operation and management efficiency. We will talk about how they are managing their assets, how they are managing their finance, how they are doing their technical operations. So these are like more related with the process indicators. So for example, like this service provider might have the good level and quality of water supply service, but if it goes on the same way, there is a possibility that it might go down soon because their operational management efficiency is not that good. So this is in the risk zone if the capacity is not built for this service provider. Whereas this service provider, we can see they have a good management and operation efficiency, good characteristics in terms of institution, but this is suffering from the capital investment problem, because only seeing from this we can identify, because this is not getting as expected level and quality of water supply service. So this might require like more reservoirs, more treatment units, or expansion of pipes, or this kind of thing. So capital investment is required in this service provider, whereas in this service provider the capacity building is required. So if this kind of data goes to the regulator, then we'll know where we should invest in terms of capital investment and where we should invest in terms of capacity development. So it will give the business to the capacity development institution also, because they will be able to segregate what kind of capacity development will be required. So we have a training center called National Water Supply and Sanitation Training Center. So we are thinking packaging the capacity development initiative according to these data sets, if we get these data properly. So our expectation is like in water supply service provider, which we will start with at least 100 service providers and try to build the capacity building packages. So the same kind of things can be done for the sanitation service providers also, seeing whether they require the capital investment or whether they require the capacity building support. So different capacity building packages. For example, like capacity building package for OHS, capacity building package for the asset management. So these kind of packages can be developed based on this one. So as I mentioned before, these are the 5 outputs that were on the vertical line you saw. So the coverage, sufficiency, quality, accessibility and reliability. So we have like definitions on how to measure this. And then we have like processes such as like asset management, maintenance, how do they do the maintenance, whether the logbook is there or not, how much time do they take. So that is like in meantime repair, and non-revenue water calculation has been done or not, whether they are able to identify the bigger leakages or not. So these all are in terms of progressive realization. Ladder based approach has been taken in this one, where they want to reach in upcoming years on the ladder based approach. So average domestic tariff in terms of financial management, operating ratio, contribution to investment and financial accountability. Similarly, how they are doing the complaint handling and how they are handling the user satisfaction. The business plan is prepared or not, whether they have the human resource development plan or not, or whether the gender equity and social inclusion component has been taken care or not, whether they do the annual general meetings or not, and are the organization matured in terms of water resource management, in terms of other activities such as like water resource management, such as like diversifying the energy efficiency, and these kind of things are inside the organizational maturity. So based on this indicator, what we can do is like we can identify where they are in terms of functional, in terms of layers. So the solution to all these layers will be different for upcoming 5 years. Then we'll sit with the operators and try to discuss on the activity that will allow us to set the target. For example, like the business plan will be for this operator, it will be like where they want to reach in 5 years in terms of activities, in terms of scores, and they will decide those activities, and the rate analysis can be done, and based on that one they want to reach here. So now what will happen is like, because this will be also inside the database, we'll know in upcoming years whether they are reaching the goals or not, and if the goals is not reached, it is because of whom? Because they are not getting the adequate support from the government, or because there is still some process indicators to be improved. So regulator and operator can sit together to identify the bottlenecks every year based on this one, based on these business plans. Similar thing can be done for the sanitation also. I'm not able to show this in sanitation because because the service provision is still informal. But if it is happening in water supply provision, the same thing can be replicated in the sanitation.
And is the expectation that the wash units will do this with the water user committees?
Right now, we are not expecting the wash unit to be capacitated enough to be doing this.
Yeah.
But we expect them to be on the front with us assisting technically in this
okay.
regard. So federal and provincial governments' role is to assist the local governments wash units. But since they are very new, we are aware that they need a lot of capacity building, and that should also be one of the capacity building packages for that training center. So we should be able to know which local governments require what kind of support.
Okay. So you have like a train the trainer program kind
also that should also come in the form of database, so that we'll be know, because we are tracking like 753 local governments, so we should be able to know what kind of training would be required for which government, right? So that should also comes as a database, so that we will be able to formulate our capacity development packages according to that database. So the business plan will be like that, but how we will do that? So it is like we'll do the SWOT analysis based on each KPIs that we are talking about. I will give you example on this one. So I have taken non-revenue water in this one. So there is a strength, like work meters present in the system and districts are metered, right? So this is the strength. The weakness is like staff are not capacitated enough to calculate or reduce non-revenue water. And the opportunity is training center arranges the training for NRW. Threat is substandards metered available on market. So based on this SWOT analysis, if we have to develop the activity, there like activity would be, they need to capacitate the staffs on non-revenue water reduction. That would be one activity. And if we see the threat, the service providers need to initiate the dialogues in the federal level about the market, about the market's standardization, because substandard meters are present in the market. So who will be checking those meters and whether the quality assurance is there or not in the federal level? So at least the advocacy component should come from the service provider, and then once the dialogue happens, it's up to the federal government to move these things forward. So you can see there are like 2 activities already developed inside the business plan. So if the advocacy component has happened, that means the operators have already done their work, but still there are substandard meters in market. That means the federal government is yet to do their work. So it is not the operator's problem, it is the government's problem. But if the advocacy component has not happened as suggested in business plan, then that is operator's problem. So while we are doing the negotiation in each year, we'll try to sort out whose responsibility has not been met if the business plan's goal is not achieved.